I sat in the chair across from Catherine Holt's desk, my hands folded tightly in my lap so she wouldn't notice my fingers picking at each other. Her office was quiet in that uncomfortable way, just the soft hum of her computer fan and the ticking wall clock I'd stared at for years while waiting outside her door. She finally looked up. "Thanks for waiting." "Maris." "No problem," I said. She clicked her mouse, then turned slightly toward me. "We've reviewed your performance over the past year." I nodded. "You've been consistent," she continued. "Reliable, especially with the Halverson account. That recovery brought in 2 new clients." I waited. She paused, blinking slowly, then said, "Overall, your performance has been adequate." The word settled heavy in my chest. Adequate. 8 years of late nights, weekend calls, fixing problems no one else wanted to touch. Adequate. "For the leadership role," she went on, "we're looking for someone with stronger presence, more visibility." I kept my voice steady. "Can you clarify what you mean by visibility?" "It's not just about doing the work," she said calmly. "It's about being seen doing it." So that was it. Not results, not outcomes. Optics. "I understand," I said. She smiled, relieved, and slid a thin folder across the desk. "We're restructuring. Today will be your last day." I stood, smoothed my jacket, and nodded once. "Thank you for the feedback." She seemed surprised I didn't argue. I walked out, past my desk, past the team I'd quietly kept afloat for years. I packed slowly, laptop last, badge on top, at 5 o'clock. I left the building without saying goodbye. The drive home was silent, no radio, just traffic and my own breathing. When I opened the front door, my daughter Lena came running down the hallway in her socks. "You're home early," she said. Confused? "Yeah," I replied. "I am." She studied my face. "Is everything okay?" I set my bag down and smiled. "It is now. We made dinner together. Pasta, too much sauce. She told me about school, about a girl who borrowed her pencil and never gave it back. I listened. Really listened. Later. We sat on the couch, her feet tucked under my leg, watching a show we'd both seen too many times. She leaned her head against my arm and sighed. "I like when you're home," she said quietly. "So do I." I answered. That night, after she fell asleep. I stood alone in the kitchen for a long moment. The house was still, and for the first time in years, nothing was pulling at me. Take a second with me, unclench your jaw, let your shoulders drop, and rest your eyes on something far away. For a few breaths, your body will thank you for it. Where are you listening from right now if this moment feels familiar? Stay with me and consider subscribing. The quiet part of this story is just ending. And what comes next is where everything begins. The next morning, I woke up at the same time I always had. 6:30. Alarm off before it rang. Habit is stubborn like that. I made coffee, packed Lena's lunch, and walked her to the bus stop. She waved twice before climbing on, the way she always did when she wanted to be sure I was watching. I stayed until the bus disappeared, then walked back inside. For the first time in years. I didn't open my laptop. I sat at the kitchen table instead, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone lukewarm, and let the quiet settle. No calendar alerts, no urgent emails, no red exclamation points demanding attention. By mid-morning, I noticed how strange it felt not to be needed. At work, I had been the person people went to when something broke, when a client escalated, when a deadline quietly slipped past everyone else. I fixed things before they became visible. That had been my value. At home, none of that mattered. I did laundry, cleaned out a drawer I'd been meaning to tackle for years, found an old notebook from Lena's first year of school, her crooked handwriting filling the pages. I sat on the floor and read it longer than I meant to. Around noon, my phone buzzed, then again. I flipped it face down without checking. I picked Lena up early that afternoon. She looked surprised when she saw me waiting. "You didn't forget?" she asked. "No," I said. I remembered. We stopped for groceries on the way home. She insisted on choosing cereal, even though I knew she'd eat it twice and forget it existed. At the checkout, she leaned against the cart and said, casually, "You seem different." I smiled. "Different, how not tired?" she said after a moment. That landed harder than I expected. That evening, after dinner, I finally looked at my phone. Missed calls, messages, names I recognized immediately, people who hadn't checked in for years unless something was wrong. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I just felt distant. Like I'd stepped off a moving walkway and the world hadn't noticed yet. The next morning, I dropped Lena off at school and drove past the familiar exit toward Northbridge before I realized what I was doing. Muscle memory again. I laughed quietly and kept driving, back home. I opened my laptop not to work, but to update my resume. Not out of panic, out of clarity. I listed what I'd actually done, not the titles they'd given me, the systems I'd built, the fires I'd put out. It was longer than I expected. As the sun dipped lower, my phone buzzed again on the counter. I let it buzz. For once, the silence wasn't a problem to solve. It was a choice. By the third morning, the quiet had weight, not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses gently but insists on being noticed. I woke before the alarm again. Though there was no reason to. Lena was still asleep, one arm flung over her pillow, hair a mess across her face. I stood in the doorway longer than usual, then closed the door softly and went to the kitchen. Coffee brewed, steam rose, still no laptop. My phone sat on the counter, face up this time. It didn't take long. The first call came just after 8. I let it ring out. A minute later, another. Then a text. "Hey, Maurice. Quick question, can you call me when you get a sec? I recognize the number." Evan, senior associate. He'd shadowed me for nearly a year and never once asked how I was doing, unless something was on fire. Another buzz. Then another. I didn't feel satisfaction, just confirmation. I dropped Lena off at school and drove aimlessly for a while, letting traffic pull me along. At a red light, my phone lit up again. This time, Catherine's name. I didn't answer. Back home. I sat at the dining table and opened my resume again, rereading what I'd written the day before, without the company logo wrapped around it. My work looked different. Heavier, more complete. Midday. The voicemail icon showed double digits. I listened to the first one. Maris. "It's Evan. We're having some trouble with the Halverson transition. There are a few things only you really know. Can you call me back? Only you really know?" I stopped the message. The next voicemail was shorter, more tense. "Maurice, this is Rachel from Finance. We're missing documentation on the compliance workflow you handled. We can't find it anywhere." I already knew why. I had never hidden anything. I'd labeled everything clearly, saved it in shared drives, explained it more than once. They just never bothered to learn it themselves. By late afternoon, the tone changed. Messages weren't polite anymore. They were urgent, fragmented, a little panicked. I picked Lena up from school and took her for ice cream. Even though it wasn't planned, she chose a flavor she didn't like and ate it anyway. At home, while she worked on homework at the kitchen table, my phone buzzed again. I finally answered. "Mary's," Catherine said immediately. "No greeting. We need to talk. I'm with my daughter," I replied. A pause. Then, softer. "Can you call me later? I'll see," I said, and ended the call. Lena looked up. "Was that work?" "Yes," I said. She nodded, then went back to writing. That night, after she fell asleep, I checked my phone one last time. Dozens of missed calls. I didn't return any of them. Tomorrow, I would drive back to Northbridge, not to fix anything, just to show up. Observant viewers will notice something unusual here. What about you? I parked 2 blocks away from Northbridge and sat in the car longer than necessary. Not out of fear, out of habit. For years. I'd used those last quiet minutes to brace myself for whatever crisis was waiting upstairs. Today, there was no bracing, just a slow breath. Then another. I checked the time, 9 sharp, inside. The lobby smelled the same polished floors, burned coffee, that faint chemical clean that never quite disappeared. The receptionist looked up, surprised. "Oh, hi. Maris." "Morning," I said. No badge to scan. Security hadn't deactivated it yet. Another small thing I'd always handled for them. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. When the doors opened on my floor, the noise hit me first, phones ringing, voices overlapping, chairs scraping back too quickly. Then the looks. People froze mid-step when they saw me. A few stared openly, others pretended very hard not to. I walked past my old desk already cleared. Someone else sitting there now, eyes wide, unsure whether to acknowledge me. I didn't stop. Catherine's office door was open. She was standing, phone pressed to her ear, one hand gripping the edge of her desk. She saw me and paused. "I'll call you back," she said sharply, then hung up. "Maris," she said, forcing a smile. "I wasn't expecting you. I said I'd see." I replied. She gestured toward the chair. I didn't sit. "We're having some challenges," she began. "There are gaps we didn't anticipate." I nodded once. "That happens." Her jaw tightened. "The Halverson account is threatening to escalate. Finance can't locate the compliance framework you managed. Ops is asking questions I don't have answers to." I waited. "You built a lot of systems," she continued, "and we may have underestimated how interconnected they were." Underestimated. I folded my arms. "What are you asking me for?" "Catherine." She hesitated. "That told me everything. We'd like you to help stabilize things," she said finally. "Short-term, consulting basis." I almost laughed. Almost. "And the leadership role I asked, the one I wasn't visible enough for." She looked away. "That's not relevant right now." I stepped back toward the door. "I'm not here to fix anything," I said calmly. "I came to collect the rest of my personal files." Her eyes widened. "Maris, be reasonable. The team needs you." "The team relied on me," I corrected. "There's a difference." Outside her office, the floor had gone quiet. Everyone was listening. I could feel it. "I'll send you an email," Catherine said, voice tight. "With terms?" "You can," I replied. "I may or may not respond." I walked out without waiting for her answer. As the elevator doors closed, my phone buzzed in my hand. A new message. "We're prepared to talk about adjustments." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Adjustments weren't what they owed me. And for the first time, they knew it. I didn't reply to Catherine's message that day. I drove home instead, windows down, letting the noise of the city wash through the car. Not to clear my head was already clear, but to remind myself that I wasn't trapped inside their building anymore. At home. Lena was at the table coloring, tongue pressed to the corner of her mouth, the way she did when she was concentrating. I set my keys down quietly and watched her for a moment before she noticed me. "You're back already?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just had to pick something up." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to filling in the sky with too much purple. That evening, after she went to bed, I finally opened my laptop. Not my resume this time, a blank document. I wrote a list, not emotional, not dramatic, just factual. What I knew, what I'd built, what I controlled access to, even now. By the time I finished, the list was longer than the severance agreement Catherine had slid across her desk. My phone rang at 7:30. I let it ring twice before answering. "Maris," Catherine said, her voice carefully neutral. "Thank you for taking the call." "I didn't say thank you," I replied. A pause. "We're prepared to offer you a consulting arrangement," she continued. "Short-term, competitive rate, immediate start. Send it in writing," I said. "It's time-sensitive," she added. "Every hour we wait is expensive." I finished. I know. Another pause. I could picture her weighing how far to push. "We also want to revisit your exit," she said. There may have been missteps. Missteps, I repeated. Yes. We're open to adjustments. I leaned back in my chair. Here are my terms. She inhaled sharply, like she hadn't expected that. I don't fix systems I don't control, I said. If I come back in any capacity, I decide scope, priorities, and access. No exceptions. Silence. I won't report to you, I added, and I won't train replacements to take my place again. That's unusual, she said carefully. So was firing the person holding your operations together, I replied. She didn't argue. I'll need time to review, she said finally. You should, I said. And Catherine, yes. This isn't about leverage. It's about reality. The call ended without a goodbye. I closed my laptop and stood in the quiet kitchen. No adrenaline, no triumph, just a steady sense of balance returning. They weren't calling because they respected me. They were calling because things were breaking. And this time, I wasn't rushing to catch the pieces. Tomorrow. They decide whether they wanted help or control. Either way, the answer would tell me everything. If you think you understand, the next paragraph will change your mind. They didn't respond that night. I expected that. Northbridge had always moved fast when the answer was easy and slow when it wasn't. Silence was their favorite negotiation tool. They liked to make people wait, to let uncertainty do the softening for them. It didn't work this time. The next morning, I woke before the sun and went for a short walk around the block. The air was cool, the street quiet except for a delivery truck idling at the corner. I focused on the rhythm of my steps, the sound of my breath, the way my shoulders felt without a laptop bag pulling them down. By the time I got back, my phone was already buzzing. 3 missed calls, 2 emails, 1 calendar invite marked urgent. I ignored the invite and opened the email instead. It was from Daniel Reeves, someone I hadn't heard from in years. Senior leadership, one of the people whose approval Catherine had always needed. Maurice, we've been briefed on the current situation. I'd like to connect directly. Directly. That was new. I replied with one sentence. I'm available this afternoon. The meeting was virtual. No office, no glass desk, no familiar power plays. Just Daniel's face on a screen, looking more tired than I remembered. Thank you for making time, he said. I didn't. I replied. I took time. He nodded once, accepting the correction. We're experiencing instability, he began. Processes that were assumed to be transferable apparently weren't. Assumed, I said. Yes. He exhaled. We underestimated the concentration of operational knowledge. That was the most honest sentence I'd heard from them in years. We need to stabilize client confidence, he continued, and we believe you're uniquely positioned to help. I told Catherine my terms. I said, she shared them. He replied, some of them raised concerns. Of course they did. He didn't smile. Control is difficult for leadership to give up. Then leadership should have learned the systems they depended on. I said. Silence stretched between us. Not awkward, just measured. What would it take? He asked finally. For you to come back, I didn't answer immediately. I thought of Lena at the kitchen table, of evenings without email, of how easy it would be to say no and walk away clean. I don't come back as a favor, I said. I come back with authority, clear decision rights, written, and I decide how long I stay. He leaned back, considering. That's a significant shift, he said. So is what's happening on your end, I replied. Another pause. We'll draft something, he said. Today. Good, I answered. Because tomorrow, I may no longer be available. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief. I felt calm. The pressure wasn't on me anymore. It was on them. The document arrived just before noon. Not from Catherine. Not even from Daniel. It came from legal, clean subject line, no apology. Just a draft agreement attached. As if this were a routine transaction and not the result of a system quietly unraveling. I opened it slowly and read every line. They offered a title that sounded important enough to calm the board. They offered a rate that suggested urgency, not generosity, and buried between the clauses. There it was, decision authority, scope control, direct reporting lines that bypassed Catherine entirely. They were giving me room. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. I didn't sign it, instead. I printed it out and set it on the kitchen table. Lena was home early that day, sprawled on the floor with a school project spread around her like a small disaster zone. "Is that work?" she asked, peering up at the papers. "Sort of," I said. She considered that, then shrugged and went back to cutting construction paper. I watched her for a moment, then sat down with a pen. I crossed out 3 clauses, added 2 sentences, wrote 1 note in the margin, clear and firm, no on-call expectation, no emergency access without my approval, end date at my discretion. I scanned the document and sent it back without commentary. An hour later, my phone rang. Daniel again. "You're pushing," he said. "Not unkindly." "I'm clarifying," I replied. He was quiet for a beat. "Catherine is unhappy." "I'm not reporting to her," I said. That was clear. "Yes," he said. It was. Another pause. "You're changing how we operate," he added. "No," I said. "I'm changing how I operate. You're deciding whether you can live with that." He laughed softly at that, not amused, resigned. "I'll get approval," he said. "You'll decide," I corrected. Approval implies permission. When the call ended, I folded the papers and slid them into a drawer. I didn't hover over my inbox. I didn't pace. I took Lena to the park instead. We sat on a bench while she climbed and fell and climbed again. At one point, she ran over. Breathless. "Are you going back to work?" she asked. I thought about it. About glass offices and late nights, and being praised for fixing what shouldn't have been broken in the first place. "I'm going back differently," I said. She nodded, satisfied with that answer. By the time we got home, my inbox had 1 new message. Approved. No exclamation point, no congratulations, just acceptance. I closed my laptop and started dinner. Tomorrow, I would walk back into Northbridge, not as an employee, as a condition they had finally agreed to. And this time, I wouldn't be carrying them. I'd be setting the weight down exactly where it belonged. I returned to Northbridge on a Tuesday. Not early, not late, exactly on time. I didn't wear anything new, just the same neutral blazer, flat shoes, hair pulled back the way it always was when I needed to think clearly. The difference wasn't how I looked, it was how I moved. No badge check again. Still active, still overlooked. The lobby quieted when I walked through. Not dramatically, just enough. People recognized me now. Not as the person who fixed things, but as the reason things had stopped working. Catherine wasn't waiting for me this time. That felt intentional. Instead, a junior analyst met me at the elevator. Eyes wide, holding a tablet like a shield. "Daniel asked me to bring you upstairs," he said. Upstairs meant a floor I'd only seen twice in 8 years. The conference room was all glass and light. Daniel was already there, along with 2 people from legal and 1 from finance. Catherine sat at the far end, arms crossed, expression controlled. No one offered me coffee. I took a seat anyway. Daniel cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming back." "Maurice." "I didn't come back," I said. "I came in." A few glances exchanged. "We want to align on priorities," he continued. "Stabilization. First." "Then no," I said calmly. "First, we reset expectations." Silence. "I'm not here to absorb chaos," I went on. "I'm here to redesign what caused it. That means some things will stop. Some projects will pause. Some people will be uncomfortable." Finance shifted in their chair. Catherine spoke up. "We can't afford disruption right now." "You already have disruption," I replied. "You just don't control it." That landed. I slid a single-page document across the table. Not a report, a boundary list, office hours, Decision lanes. Escalation rules. This is how I work, I said. If it doesn't suit you, we end this now. Daniel picked it up and scanned it. He nodded slowly. This is precise, he said. It has to be, I replied. Precision is what keeps systems standing. Catherine didn't look at me. She stared at the table. I'll need access to the Core Ops dashboard, I added, and I'll be meeting directly with team leads, not through intermediaries. That bypasses management, Catherine said sharply. It bypasses bottlenecks, I corrected. Daniel closed the document. We agreed to this. Catherine exhaled, tight and controlled, but said nothing. The meeting ended without applause, without resolution, just a quiet understanding that something had shifted and couldn't be shifted back. As I stood to leave, Daniel said, You'll start seeing changes quickly. I know, I said. So will you. Back in the elevator. Alone this time. I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Relief. For years. I'd carried weight no one acknowledged. Now it was visible, measured, placed exactly where it belonged. And if it cracked something, that meant it had been cracked already. Tomorrow. The real work would begin. The first sign wasn't loud. It was a missed meeting. A senior client didn't show up to a scheduled call. Then followed with a short email asking to reschedule after internal clarification. That phrase had weight. It meant doubt had reached the surface. By mid-morning, 2 more calls were postponed. I didn't rush. I watched. From a small conference room. I pulled up the ops dashboard I'd been locked out of for years. The data hadn't changed. The problems had always been there. What changed was that no one was smoothing them over anymore. Team leads came in one by one. Not summoned. Curious. They spoke carefully at first, like people testing ice. I let them talk. I asked questions I'd never been allowed to ask before. Why this process existed. Who approved that shortcut? When documentation stopped being updated, answers came slowly, then more freely. By noon, the pattern was clear. Decisions had been layered on top of decisions until no one remembered the foundation. Catherine's style. Fast approvals, minimal follow-up, results on paper, gaps underneath. At one point, an analyst named Renee hesitated, then said, We used to bring these issues to you. I know, I replied. And then, it stopped, she said. I nodded. It didn't stop, it was redirected. That afternoon, Daniel joined one of the sessions. He didn't interrupt, he listened. I watched him realize, in real time, how much risk had been hidden by momentum. Later, in the hallway, he said quietly, This is bigger than we thought. It always is, I said. When things only work because one person won't let them fail. Catherine avoided me all day. That told me enough. At 4:30, I sent out a single message to leadership. No blame, no drama, just facts. What was paused? What was broken? What would not be fixed until ownership was clear? Replies came fast. Questions, pushback, concern. I answered none of them. Instead, I shut my laptop and went to pick up Lena. She asked if we could walk home instead of drive. So we did. The air was cool, the sky low and gray. She kicked a stone the whole way, narrating a story only she understood. At dinner, she asked, Did you fix everything? I smiled. No? Is that bad? No? I said again. It means things are finally being seen. That night, after she went to bed, I checked my email once more. A message from the board. We need to talk. I closed the laptop. Tomorrow wouldn't be quiet, but it would be honest, and whatever happened next, it wouldn't be invisible. The board call was brief, not rushed, just precise. They asked questions I'd waited years to hear, not about optics, not about timelines, about ownership, accountability. What happens when speed replaces structure? I answered calmly. I didn't soften anything. When the call ended, there was no victory speech, no applause, just a quiet acknowledgement that the company would change, or it wouldn't survive long enough to matter. I walked out of the building before sunset. Outside. The air felt lighter, not because the work was done, but because it finally belonged where it should. I drove home without checking my phone. The city slipping past like it always had, only this time. It didn't feel like I was late for something. Lena met me at the door. Backpack half zipped, shoes kicked off in the wrong place. "Did you win?" she asked. I smiled. "That's not how it works." She considered that. "Did you lose? No," I said. I learned. We made dinner together. Nothing special. We talked about her day, about a science project, about a classmate who talks too much. Later, after she fell asleep, I stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. Steady and slow. The house was quiet again. A good quiet. I thought about Northbridge, about Catherine, about the years I'd spent believing that being indispensable meant being valued. It doesn't. Being visible isn't the same as being necessary, and being necessary isn't the same as being respected. I turned off the light and closed the door. Tomorrow, I'd keep working on my terms, or I'd walk away. Either option was real now, and that, more than anything they'd ever offered me, felt like enough. I didn't tell this story to prove that walking away makes you strong. I told it because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop carrying what was never meant to be yours alone. For a long time, I thought value came from being needed. I was wrong. Value comes from knowing when your presence costs too much of yourself. As you listened, what moment stayed with you the longest? The quiet drive home, the unanswered calls, or the first evening back with my daughter? And more importantly, how did this story make you feel if you're comfortable sharing? Tell me where you're listening from right now. Your voice matters here. If this story resonated, leave a comment, give the video a like, or share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you want more stories about dignity, boundaries, and quiet strength, I'd be glad to have you subscribe and stay with me.